Hotel brothers and sisters, Black Power, giving all blessings to the Creator and the ancestors, all honor and praise. Also, my sister, Chief of Staff, Brother Harris Abdul, my father, my in-laws, my subscribers, all my followers, listeners, and those who are fighting for the liberation and salvation of our black nation. First of all, let me give a shout out to William Ivory, brother down there in Memphis, Tennessee, who is I had the pleasure of chopping it up with the little young god yesterday, and he appears to be on point with a lot of things. However, he's a before anyone can become a leader, you have to be a excellent student. And so, in the process of his growth and development, which I see is very, very committed and structured, he'll go a long ways in his fight to liberate his people under any conditions and by any means. Today I want to talk about this brother Nick Cannon, who is a very, very underestimated. Let's don't put him on the forefront. Keep him hush hush behind the scenes brother, which they are unable to do. Nick Cannon is a strong brother, and I realize his commitment to liberate his people when he made the decision to come to Washington, D.C., to the D.C. jail, and begin to drop jewels and help our brothers that are behind enemy lines, help them raise their level of consciousness as well as their self-esteem and their commitment to come back out in society and be very, very productive in terms of the black community. And Nick Cannon is a very conscious brother. As we know, you're only allowed to be conscious to a certain limit when you are in the entertainment business. So he knows how to go about playing the spook who sat by the door, in which I respect Nick Cannon a lot. It's not a lot of brothers like him that have the courage to really stand up and be who he is. You know, this brother wears a turban and doesn't care who acknowledges, who doesn't like it, or anything of that nature, because he's standing on the shoulders of his ancestors. And so we must give him credit for that. We must give him credit for that. I know I give him an abundance of credit for standing up. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he may be of Moorish descent or a Hebrew Israelite. I'm not sure. But however, I judge and look at a brother, look at a man according to his behavior and his character. And he's trying to liberate our black men. So, you know, with that said, and on top of that, this brother is battling lupus. And a lot of you never even known that, because Nick Cannon is the type of brother that he doesn't complain. You know, he doesn't whine or anything. He's not looking for sympathy, because he's just taking his time and not wasting any time by getting busy helping our brothers and sisters become liberated. So for those who don't know Nick Cannon, he's one of our brothers that is in the entertainment world putting in work. And so we must honor him for that. Give him high honors. You know, now I want to talk about this NFL, this NFL NBA draft, where it's only a high tech auction block. And that's the only thing that changed, because the slave auction and the NFL and NBA draft are literally the same in so many ways. Whereas according to a black man's ability and his strength and his speed and his athletic ability will determine who will do the bidding and who will buy him and whose plantation he will work for until he is injured to the point where he can no longer perform on that plantation and he's cut loose from that plantation to live among the have-nots once again. So, and the NFL and NBA basically have the same, the same structure. Only thing is different is the numbers in terms of recruitment and who seeks out, who sets out to be a professional athlete. Now the NBA, out of a million kids, 40,000 make it to high school, 4,000 to college, 35 to the NBA, and only 7 will start. And the average playing time is 4 to 6 years. So in other words, you have a million boys applying for 7 positions with a lifespan of 4 to 6 years. And the only difference between the NBA and the NFL is the numbers, because there are more players in the NFL. And so that's the sadness of it. And I tried to tell these sisters and these brothers, stop pushing your babies to be one of those 35 to make it, because it is too much grueling work and physical turmoil to go through all of that to play for 4 to 6 years and then retire, knees busted, ACLs torn, broken necks, fingers broken, legs broke, spine is crooked. And if you don't save every penny that you get in terms of your contract, you will go back to the hood. And the only thing you will have to show for it is memories, stories, and that's about it. And that's about it with a whole bunch of injuries. So let's be for real, brothers and sisters. The black community needs an abundance of doctors, surgeons, lawyers, judges, conscious police, conscious FBI. We are in need of those positions for conscious black people, for our conscious black brothers and sisters. This is the auction block. This is the NFL auction block. This is where they come when the people, when these so-called white imposter Jews, when they bid on these brothers, and they walk up and they put their hat on with the suit that's too small for them, and they say, "Mom, I made it. We can get out of the hood for a minute." A lot of these brothers don't have any business skills, but they have an abundance of social skills, meaning they know how to make it rain in the club, and they give away money like, it's no tomorrow. And then 4 years from now, they don't have anything. And they know this. That's why they love to find these brothers when they make illegal hits or fighting on the court. Taking $25,000 to $50,000 a clip on fines. And you may think that a lot of these athletes have it like that, but they really don't. You may get a $10 million contract, and then the IRS is getting 40% of that. But they don't come and get it right away. They allow you to spend the money so they can come back and penalize you, and you'll owe twice as much as you did from the beginning. It's all a game. It's all a game. And so I hope that a lot of you young guys are paying attention to this. Whether I explain it properly or not, or thorough enough for you to comprehend it in its totality, you understand where I'm coming from with this. So please pay attention. Go to college and get a business degree, a law degree, so you can help some of our brothers and sisters that are behind enemy lines and help them get out of prison. Help them get them out of being a slave for the prison industrial complex. Now I want to talk about this faggot J. Edgar Hoover, because it always crosses my mind when I make libation or when I'm giving my prayers or chants to the Creator and the ancestors for what they've done, for how they laid their lives down. And let me tell you something about that. We always celebrate a lot of these brothers and sisters for laying their lives down. But it's been passed on to us for us to lay our lives down. And how many of you will honestly, willingly lay your life down for the liberation and salvation of your children, of your grandchildren, of the future generations, and go down in history as a freedom fighter? Because a lot of you want to go down as just a good employee for the government, a good slave, that you retired from some government plantation, and that you were a good person. You know how to play spades real good. You could cook a good pig feet. All this bullshit. All this selfish slave mentality and behavior that you may demonstrate most of your adult life, opposed to being someone that bucks against the fucking system, fights the system of racism, white supremacy, doesn't worry about going to prison, going to jail, fighting these motherfucking pigs. Because when white supremacy labels you as something negative, that means that you're on the ball for black liberation. You're putting in work. But if white supremacy pats you on the back and say you are a good nigga, that means you are a hindrance to black liberation and salvation. Don't forget that. And so, this faggot J. Edgar Hoover, when he became FBI director, him and his G-men, Melvin Pervert, and the rest of those fags at the FBI, Clyde Tolson, who was Hoover's lover, who, when Hoover died at his funeral at Arlington Cemetery, usually they give the flag to the widow. They gave Hoover's flag to this white faggot Clyde Tolson, who was acting as Hoover's wife. Now, if you get the book by Anthony Summers called The Secret Life of J. Edgar Hoover, you will see when Hoover, even during the time that Kennedy was assassinated, Hoover was in Pimlico Racetrack in Baltimore, dressed up as a woman with a black veil over his face, because Meyer Lansky used to fix races for Hoover. Hoover and Lansky, that's why Hoover never pushed it when it came to knocking these white so-called gangsters off. But he had no problem taking down and assassinating, putting orders of extermination to our ancestors, to our great leaders who really put in work. Marcus Garvey, for one, had a following of 6 million, over 6 million. He had nearly 100 chapters all over the planet with the Back to Africa movement, the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association. But as always, Garvey trusted the wrong people. This black devil, Joshua Coburn, allowed a cracker to talk him into buying a ship that was so fucked up and busted up that there was no way it could make the voyage to Liberia. He made 2 deals like that. And so when the ship first sailed, he had 2 captains. Garvey had 2 captains. The first captain, Garvey knocked out cold. And I believe he was related to Joshua Coburn. But Marcus Garvey knocked him out cold because he was about to have a nervous breakdown when he was sailing the ship. The second captain took the ship and went to go visit a woman which was on the other side of New York. And I don't have to tell you what Garvey done to his ass. But nevertheless, a black agent for the FBI, Garvey trusted. They were very, very tight, but he was an agent. I think his numbers were 5 zeros and an 8. It was something of that magnitude. But that's who helped bring Garvey down and set him up on the mail fraud. He went to Atlanta Penitentiary. He was sentenced to 5 years of hard labor, in which it took a toll on Garvey. Garvey was deported back to Jamaica, where he was clowned, he was ridiculed, he was disrespected. Little children throwing rocks at him. And Garvey ended up having 2 major strokes, with the second one being fatal. Thanks to J. Edgar Hoover, Gay Edgar Hoover. It's the same with Noble Drew Ali and the Moorish Science Temple. He was taken down and he was arrested and questioned for the murder of Sheik Claude Green, who was planted in the Moorish Science Temple. And he was trying to move Garvey out of the way so he could lead the Moorish Science Temple, in which Noble Drew Ali created. Sheik Claude Green was found in his office because he was a Tuskegee graduate and he was a broker. He was found in his office, shot several times and stabbed several times. Noble Drew Ali was taken into custody But before they had to let him go because lack of evidence. But while he was being held, he was beaten. They put phone books on him and beat him so he would have eternal bleeding. He was released and passed away the following day. Thanks to J. Edgar Hoover. Elijah Muhammad with the Nation of Islam. It was so much corruption going on in the Nation of Islam that it caused dissension between the members. Members were going against one another. And as you know, we all know about Malcolm and Elijah. But the NYPD and the FBI were the ones who infiltrated the NOI, which ultimately led to the murder of Malcolm X. But let's talk about this brother. A lot of you all don't even know who this is. Carlos Cooks of the African Nationalist Pioneer Movement. And what he started was an extension to the UNIA. He was a Garveyite, and what he established an organization to continue the legacy of Marcus Garvey. And his membership was pretty high at one time. However, it was infiltrated and membership dwindled down to just a few hundred, and they're still around today, scattered around, primarily in New York, Connecticut, and more of the on the Eastern Seaboard. Nevertheless, Carlos Cooks was a very, very strong brother. But thanks to J. Edgar Hoover, the African Nationalist Pioneer Movement was dismantled. We know about Malcolm X, the assassination of Malcolm X, who was involved, who wasn't involved. And as we know, Eugene Roberts, who I mentioned in the video yesterday, played a major role in setting Malcolm up to be assassinated, thanks to J. Edgar Hoover. So everyone was looking at Elijah Muhammad. But till this day, we're not sure who was actually involved. I can just name a lot of the players and possibilities. And it could have possibly been all of them. Everybody that I've mentioned. Could have been Elijah, NYPD, FBI, NOI, because a lot of people were angry at Malcolm, especially Louis Walcott, now known as Minister Louis Farrakhan, who created and assisted in the climate of hate that led to the assassination of Malcolm. So when, one thing I've noticed about the Nation of Islam is that the cracker can say and do anything that they want, and they are greeted. It appears that they are greeted. There's no repercussions. But when a black man or black woman says anything negative about the Nation of Islam, some of these members cannot wait to annihilate a brother or sister. But I've never seen them go on any crackers. I've never seen them go on L. Ron Hubbard. I've never seen, on the Scientology crew. I've never seen them say anything about Flager. They call him Father Flager. Mr. Farrakhan said that's his brother, but you know, how can that be your brother? You know, but you wouldn't allow Khalid Muhammad to come back into the nation, knowing he was committed. He loved everything about Minister Farrakhan. He was like his father. And so, you know, those are the, you know, the little issues that I had with them. But nevertheless, I remember the Nation of Islam had canneries, furniture stores. They were powerful, a powerful movement and organization in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. Very, very powerful. I don't see any stores or anything now. You know, basically all I see, you know, is a lot of brothers wearing $2,000 and $3,000 suits and, you know, and just talking. You know, because I love the brothers of the Nation of Islam. Brother Nuri Muhammad, I'm really hoping that he becomes, you know, the next leader of the nation. I really admire his poise. I really admire his structure, his discipline, his respect for the nation. But also, the main thing I admire, he goes on the cracker's ass. You know, no ifs, ands, or buts. Dr. King, Merrill McCullough, Jesse Jackson, Billy Cowles, Andy Young, Amos and Andy Young. They were all in on the assassination. Andy Young especially. And I remember Andy Young telling Steve Coakley that if he can straighten everything out and get the culprits that are involved, it can clear his soul. In other words, if you can make sure that you get the people involved, I'll be willing to talk about everything else that took place. Because Andy Young was in on the assassination too. And when I say in on it, that means you knew about it. You knew it was coming. When and where it was coming. And you done nothing. And so, if Dr. King was protected, because let me explain this to you all, for those who don't know. In the Lorraine Motel, there were a group of young brothers from Chicago called the Invaders that was on the second floor under Dr. King, and all of them had guns. And they were protecting Dr. King. But what happened was, Jesse went and told the Invaders that Dr. King was up at the Masonic Temple. And so when the Invaders went to the Masonic Temple, that's when the assassination took place. See, Jesse got those brothers out of that room so that the assassination can go down. And while they were at the Masonic Temple, they realized that they were tricked. Also, it was only one plane, because all the buses, trains, everything was closed down. Airports, everything was closed down when King was assassinated. They only let one plane out of Memphis that night. And that was the FBI. And that's the plane that Jesse was on. Because he will not answer if you ask him how did he get out of Memphis the night King was murdered. So brothers and sisters, we have to be very, very strong in our convictions into breaking this shit down. And stop letting these motherfucking punks, these provocateurs and rats continue to walk around. You know, the black community has gotten so weak, especially the black youth. And I'll get to that in a second. Paul Robeson, who was a very, very powerful brother. Very powerful brother. J. Edgar Hoover attempted to poison Paul Robeson. You know, but Paul Robeson was a big, huge brother. And Paul Robeson not only was an actor, he was an activist that was not acting. He was serious. May he rest in power. Fred Hampton, Chicago chairman of the Chicago chapter of the Black Panther Party. Bobby Rush and another nigga put, you know, one of Bobby Rush and another nigga once again, you know, put the sleeping agent into the picture of Kool-Aid. So, you know, Fred Hampton, Defense Captain Mark Clark, and others would not be able to respond to the early morning ambush by the Chicago police. You know, and it pisses me off when I see that photo. I started to show you all today, but when I see that photo of those crackers bringing Fred Hampton's body out laughing, and what Deborah Johnson, Fred's wife, said that they were laughing and said Chairman Fred's dead and all this bullshit. You know. And so, you know, when I think of that and I see shit like that, you know, and that's why I respect Fred Hampton Jr. so much. You know, and they tried to assassinate him, you know, imprison him and set him up on arson charges and all this type of, these old bogus fucking charges, which led to him being incarcerated. You know, and I know how that feels because I have been incarcerated and have been put in the hole and all this for standing up to the motherfucking crackers. And that's how I know. And I've been always been a stand-up forefront brother. Whether I was in the streets or black consciousness, always stood up. I just never feared any human being. You know, but I always had issues with the cracker because I never had any good experiences with them. And this is what I'm saying about our young brothers, you know, who do not, you know, stand up. Have to learn to stand up, young gods. You all letting George Zimmerman continue to walk around. We keep letting these motherfucking pigs walk around. You know, and the reason why I show you all these leaders, because if they were still in physical form, a lot of this shit would not be going on. It would be a lot of motherfuckers laying down, taking dirt naps. You know, and you know, we have to really put in some work and stop being pussyfied and stop letting, you know, money be your goddamn God. You know, some obsolete, you know, some pre-obsolete motherfucking paper. And stand straight up. And be fucking warriors. Be fucking gods and kings. You know, stop being pussies. Stop being killing your own. Stop hating your motherfucking self. And get busy with the enemy who is blatantly telling you you ain't shit and that they are the enemy and daring you to do something about it. hope you all got something out of this. Leave some comments in my comment box, and I'll respond to them. You know, you can leave your information, your number. If you want me to call, we can build it over the phone or whatever. Because I'm not that type of brother that, that I'm some celebrity or some shit like that. I'm just one of the common people that break bread, with my brothers and sisters. So, with that said, brothers and sisters, as always, Hotep, Black Power.